Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Eddie Hearn had this to say. He says, it looks like Alexander Povetkin is next for Dillian Whyte. It being that Andy Ruiz, quite recently, quite famously, has rejected a lucrative offer to face Dillian Whyte in either the US or the UK. But Andy doesn't seem all that interested. Make of that what you will. And whatever it is that Andy's going to do, reportedly, based on this article, it's going to be announced very soon, and it will be a PBC event. It will be under the Premier Boxing Champions banner. One can only wonder, who are they going to put him in there with, and is the payday equal to what was on the table for him to fight Dillian Whyte? I.e., is the PBC going to pay you to fight so-and-so what Matchroom was going to pay you to fight Dillian Whyte? Is it going to be a multi-million-dollar payday in all the ways that would have been a multi-million-dollar payday? And not just a multi-million-dollar payday, but the opportunity to win interim status from Dillian Whyte, because lest we forget, he's the WBC's interim champion. He is more or less in line to fight Deontay Wilder at some point, or if it's not Wilder, just whoever's holding the WBC title by the time 2021 rolls around. That would have been the opportunity on the table for Andy, not just a couple more $1 million, but the opportunity to become interim champion. Apparently, that doesn't mean all that much to Andy. And one can only speculate if the PBC has a fight of equal value for Andy Ruiz. Are they going to pay him the way that Matchroom was going to pay him? I don't really know. Now, this is just one man's opinion. Feel free to disagree. But the only fight on the PBC side of things that intrigues me as a boxing fan, as a spectator in what is a spectator sport, the only fight I can think of that's titillating on the PBC side of things that involves Andy Ruiz and what could be another PBC fighter would be a fight with the likes of Adam Kownacki. I'd have to say that I've wanted to see that fight for a while. Ever since Andy Ruiz signed to the PBC, ever since he crossed over to that side of the street, I've long held the opinion that a fight between those two would be a real barn burner, a real Donnybrook. It's just that Adam Kownacki in America, where he's been fighting, Adam Kownacki in the United States is not tantamount equivocal to Dillian Whyte in the UK. You understand that. In the UK, Dillian Whyte is a pay-per-view attraction. He really is a marquee fighter, whereas Adam Kownacki is not those things. On this side of the Atlantic Ocean, here in the United States, he's not a pay-per-view attraction. He really isn't yet a marquee fighter. He's attempting to get there, trying to build a solid base that will carry him to that status. So even though I like the idea of a Ruiz versus Kownacki fight, and I do happen to think that that's one of the best fights the PBC can make in-house, I still don't view it as being of equal value to the Dillian Whyte fight. The Dillian Whyte fight was a bigger money fight, all things considered, than that fight. It's a question of which fight with which fighter would make you more money, because after all, this is prize fighting and you are fighting for prizes. So which fight with which fighter yields the bigger prize? And I'd have to say, even though a Kownacki fight would be a great fight, it's not equal in value to a Dillian Whyte fight.
It's not.
It is what it is. And there's no telling who Andy Ruiz is about to fight. There's no telling who he's going to lock horns with next. And in all likelihood, it probably wouldn't have been Adam anyway, because Adam's fighting next month on the 7th. Andy Ruiz's very next fight could very well be against the likes of a Chris Arreola. I wouldn't rule that out.
It's possible.
And I don't know, maybe they try to build up a Kownacki fight that way because they would both have a common opponent if Andy fought Chris. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying there are reports confirming this. I'm just brainstorming, speculating as to who the PBC will conjure up for Andy, that Andy felt so inclined to walk away from a very lucrative offer to fight Dillian Whyte. That if Andy Ruiz walked away from a Dillian Whyte fight because he's got better things to do, well, just what exactly are those things and how much better are they?
What are we talking about?
Because depending on the answer, well, that will give people out there the precedence to say that Andy ducked Dillian Whyte. In my previous video, one subscriber left a very valid point that, you know what, Andy Ruiz being in a transitional phase when it comes to trainers is no excuse, because Tyson Fury's fighting Deontay Wilder in his very next fight, and he's in a transitional phase when it comes to trainers, you know?
It's a valid point.
You know what, that's very true. That's a very valid point. And if Andy is walking away from a Whyte fight to participate in some gimme fight for less money, well, that will give people the ammunition to say wholeheartedly that Andy has ducked Dillian Whyte. And even now, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around Andy being afraid of Dillian, you understand, because Andy's the guy who decided to take on Anthony Joshua when nobody else would. The guy who beat Dillian, the guy who gave Dillian his first professional loss, the only guy who gave Dillian Whyte a professional loss.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like fear to me that is leaving Andy Ruiz so compelled to circumvent this fight, to skirt around this opportunity. It's not fear so much as laziness. That Andy Ruiz is quite content taking the path of least resistance.
What it looks like.
That's what I think is going on here, because lest we forget, Andy Ruiz is the guy who decided to party for 2 months immediately after the first Anthony Joshua fight, knowing full well that he would have to fight him again. That it is a lack of work ethic that leaves Andy Ruiz so compelled to skirt around this opportunity and go for something more tailor-made for him on the PBC side of things. I mean, if I had to give my initial impression of this, that's what I think is going on. That it's really not so much fear as laziness. So, in the absence of Andy Ruiz, Dillian Whyte is left looking for a dance partner, and that dance partner could come in the form of Alexander Povetkin. I have no aversions to that fight. I think it's an equally titillating matchup, equal risks, because, you know, Alexander Povetkin is nobody's patsy.
He hits hard.
He's still a top 10 fighter here today. He's still one of the upper echelon heavyweights in the world. Dillian Whyte runs just about the same amount of risks with Alexander as he would with Andy. It's a fight where it's anybody's fight. That, you know, Alexander can punch and he can box and he knows how to close the gap, get close to a guy and land big hooks, bombs. And Dillian, you know, what makes him exciting is that Dillian's not perfect, that it's not a foregone conclusion. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that he was going to beat Oscar Rivas.
This is a risky fight.
Hell, it wasn't even a foregone conclusion that he was going to beat Derek Chisora.
Or Parker.
You understand? And that's what makes him exciting. That Dillian is a good, formidable fighter, but he does have his drawbacks. He does have vulnerabilities. And Alexander Povetkin, you know, he has shown that even now, in the latter stages of his career, he's still a very formidable guy himself. You know, he's nobody's patsy. So that's an equally good matchup for me, that if they can't get Andy, hey, I'll take a Povetkin fight. I'll watch it. It's fine by me. In junior middleweight news, unified champion Jason Rosario says, if no Williams, I want Charlo or Lara next. The Dominican said, I will be happy to give Williams the opportunity to fight me again. He gave me the chance to fight him, so I will do the same for him. But I believe I will win again. If I don't fight Williams, I would like to fight Charlo or Lara next. They are the best, and I want to show that I am the best. I am 24, and I'm only getting better and better. And you know what? Jason's a young fighter. He's saying things that you expect a young fighter to say, a young champion. But what he's saying here is not in keeping with what his own promoter said immediately after the fight. Talking about Samson Lukowicz. He made it clear that as far as a Charlo fight, no, that's not next. And he has intentions of that fight being built up as a pay-per-view. I don't know why, because at 154, there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees that Jason is going to get to hold on to those titles any more than Julian held on to them, any more than Jarrett Hurd held on to them. But this is what Samson Lukowicz said. He said, no Charlo.
Got to win a couple fights.
He even went as far as bringing up, you know, this Russian kid, Murtaliev, as Jason's mandatory, even though here today I've heard of no such order from the IBF coming down.
Not yet.
Thereby obligating Jason to give that guy a title shot. I've heard of no such order. And in all likelihood, the Julian Williams rematch will be next. I mean, I can see that happening. It's up to Julian to exercise the clause. It's up to him to activate it, but I think he will. So, you know. Jason can say whatever he wants to say as far as a Charlo fight or a Lara fight, but I sincerely doubt that his promoter, Samson Lukowicz, shares his enthusiasm because he's pretty much said the opposite, you know?
No Charlo.
I say it all the time. At 154, you got a lot of guys. They're all competing at the same level. And it's because of this that the titles are changing hands so frequently, because nobody really stands out. Nobody's head and shoulders above anybody else. These guys, they're all competing at or around the same level, and they have different base styles that give them different advantages over different fighters. That night, it was Jason's night. But on another night, it might be some other guy's night, you know? I think what Samson Lukowicz wants more than anything is for Jason to have a couple of easy ones, a couple of gimme fights, couple of simple title defenses that will accent his finer qualities and allow him to further improve. Because Jason is a young guy. He's only 24 years old, after all, and he's a newly crowned unified champion. I'm sure Samson wants things to stay that way. He wants it to be that way. But it's going to be very difficult to do that if you put him in there with a Charlo or a Lara even, because Lara is a pure boxer. He's a pure boxer. And when it comes to Jason, he's kind of a boxer puncher, more or less. Pure boxers have a stylistic advantage over boxer punchers. And a fight like that, I dare say, it could see Erislandy Lara becoming a unified champion. That's right. It could happen that way. I mean, I'm not married to that idea, and it's not an official prediction. I'm just giving you
another possible scenario.
The lay of the land. That in a division where everybody's competing at or around the same level, it's the base styles that determine what's what. And a pure boxer like Lara does just so happen to have a stylistic advantage over a boxer puncher. So a fight like that, yeah, you know, Lara would be a live dog in that fight. I mean, I'd say so.
Yeah.
It's because it is that I don't think for a second Samson Lukowicz is going to let his boy, his newly crowned champion, Jason Rosario, go in there and risk it all against the likes of a Lara. For fighting a fucking Lara, they might as well fight that fucking Russian kid, and they can pass him off as a mandatory and say that he had to do it.
We had to.
You know, I just don't see Samson Lukowicz running risks with the likes of a Lara.
For what?
For what incentive exactly?
What's going on here?
Because, you know, Lara's not a champion anymore, so you fight that guy, why? You know, unless somebody's ordering you to fight that guy, you fight that guy, why? You know, Charlo, he's got a belt. I can understand that. But fighting Lara for the sake of fighting Lara? I don't think Samson's going to be on board with that. So, you know, like I said, Jason can say what he wants because he's a fighter, he's a young champion, but I doubt his promoter is going to let it happen that way. And finally, Mike Kopinger released this tweet during the Super Bowl between San Francisco and Kansas City. He said, Fox just ran a 15-second spot promoting Wilder vs. Fury 2 during the Super Bowl. A 30-second spot during a big game cost $5.6 million. So now, over 100 million people have awareness of the bout, in theory. And I saw this and I thought to myself,
What'd you think?
you know that you can raise awareness. You can let a lot of people know that there's some kind of big event coming to town, but that's no substitute for a genuine interest, a genuine demand.
Yeah.
That the people on the ground don't need to be made aware that something is coming to town because they've already been asking for it. You understand? You get what I'm saying?
Can't fake an interest.
I think that the same people that bought the first Wilder vs. Fury fight will buy this fight as well. But I don't think that spending $5.6 million to run an ad during a Super Bowl is going to bring this fight to 1 million or 2 million pay-per-view buys. I just don't see that happening. That kind of demand for that fight really isn't there.
Nah.
Now, do I think it's possible that Wilder vs. Fury 2 does better numbers than the first fight did? I do. I do think that this fight could possibly hit 400 to 500,000 pay-per-view buys. I do think that. But that's falling short of what Bob Arum is saying the fight will do. You know, 2 million, don't hold your fucking breath because you might asphyxiate, okay? I think that there's enough intrigue associated with the rematch that yes, it can do 100 to 200,000 more pay-per-view buys than the first fight did.
It's possible.
But you spend $5.6 million, right?
Right.
To run an ad on a Super Bowl.
Right.
And you tell guys that, okay, well now we're making that many more people aware of the fight. But those people, maybe they don't follow boxing as much as me. Maybe they see it, they think to themselves, oh, that looks interesting, and they look at the price and they tell themselves, no thank you.
Fuck that.
Could happen that way,
Fuck that.
And have you seen the undercard for this thing?
Please?
Wait, what do you got? You got Charles Martin fighting Gerald Washington? This is the best that ESPN and Fox could come up with when they let their powers combine? This is it? I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not being critical for the sake of being critical. I'm just being honest. I think the fight will do better numbers than the first fight that I do, but not that much better. 400, maybe 500,000, maybe a little over that. But nothing to the tune of 1 million. I just don't see that happening. I don't. I stand by my original assertion that if the card were more of a PBC versus Top Rank kind of affair, that would have greatly moved the needle. I mean, hypothetically speaking, just for conversation. We're making conversation.
All right.
Let's just say you had like a Ray Vargas on there, right? Ray Vargas, PBC guy.
Right.
Against an Emmanuel Navarrete, Top Rank guy. Just imagine if that won the undercard. You understand? Now, not only would you have all the Wilder versus Fury fans tuning in because they wanted to see a rematch, but you'd also have the Mexican-American fans tuning in for Vargas versus Navarrete. And as we all know, Mexican-American fans in the American pay-per-view market move the needle. It's that kind of fight that this card is missing. I mean, who the fuck do you think wants to see Charles Martin fight Gerald Washington?
Not me.
You run an ad during the Super Bowl. And as we all know, that the ads run during the Super Bowl, they're very effective. They do raise awareness. It's a good way to get your product some exposure. But this ain't the same thing as trying to sell a bag of Doritos because a bag of Doritos doesn't cost $75 fucking dollars. I just so happen to think that $5.6 million that they used to run this ad during the Super Bowl should have gone to the fighters' purses to make sure that they get involved. You tell Ray Vargas, hey, do you want to make $2.5 million your very next fight? You tell Emmanuel Navarrete the same thing. Those guys at those lighter weights, they don't get those kinds of paydays.
Super
You offer them that, maybe you can ensure their involvement, thereby doling up the card.
Making it appealing.
Perhaps stimulating the buy rate. I mean, for paying $5.6 million to run an ad, you could have dedicated that money to the fighters' purses to make sure you get some good names on this card. Instead, you blew it on 15 seconds that may or may not get you more buys. I'll tell you, man, I just don't know what the fuck they were thinking.